I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. The air was heavy, almost too quiet, like the world had paused just long enough to let me notice what was missing. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coffee cup, the one with the chipped handle she always swore she'd fix, but never did, sat clean and dry on the counter. And the bed beside me was cold. I didn't panic at first. You don't think of disaster when you see a missing pair of shoes. You think she's gone for a walk, maybe to clear her head, maybe to visit the neighbor. You think she'll be back. But the hours kept moving, and she didn't. By noon, I found the folded note on the dining table. It wasn't even sealed. Just a single sheet of paper, perfectly placed next to a half-burnt candle. There were only 5 words written on it. 5 simple words that broke my world apart. Please don't come looking for me. No explanation. No signature. Just that. Her name was Emily. We'd been married for 19 years. 19 years of love, of silence, of trying to understand each other in ways only 2 quiet souls can. We weren't perfect. I don't think anyone is. But we were steady. At least, that's what I believed. The night before she left, everything seemed normal. She made her usual chicken stew, too salty, like always, and I teased her about it. She laughed. That soft, shy laugh that always made her hide her face behind her hair. We watched some old movie she loved. She fell asleep halfway through, her head resting on my shoulder. And then she was gone. At first, I thought something had happened. Maybe an accident. Maybe she'd gone somewhere and couldn't call. I filed a report after 3 days. The police said she'd left of her own will. There were no signs of struggle. No missing money. No suspicious activity. They told me sometimes people just leave. They said maybe she was tired. Maybe she needed space. But you don't just leave 19 years of life behind for space. You don't leave your toothbrush, your clothes, your favorite book halfway through chapter 14. You don't leave the man who held your hand through every storm, without a word. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And I became a ghost inside my own home. I still cooked dinner for 2. Still left her side of the bed untouched. Still waited by the window every evening, just in case I saw her walking up the road with that small bag she always carried. People told me to move on. But how do you move on from someone who might still be breathing under the same sky as you? Just somewhere out of reach. I tried to find her. I really did. I called every friend, every relative, every old address from her childhood. Nobody knew where she went. Or maybe they did and just wouldn't tell me. Her sister, Mary, was the hardest to talk to. She looked at me with eyes that carried something more than sadness. Almost guilt. When I asked her if she knew anything, she said softly, "Maybe she needed to protect you." Protect me? From what? I remember standing there, my voice shaking, asking her over and over, "Mary, protect me from what?" But she just turned away. And that was the last time I ever saw her. The house felt emptier after that. The walls carried her laughter like an echo that refused to fade. Every corner held a memory. The kitchen where she sang to the radio while cooking, the garden she planted herself, even the small dent on the living room wall from when she accidentally dropped a vase during our first Christmas together. You never realize how much of your life exists in small things until they're gone. I wasn't always the emotional type. I used to think men weren't supposed to break. We were supposed to endure. But the silence she left behind didn't just sit quietly. It screamed. I'd wake up at night thinking I heard her footsteps in the hall. I'd set 2 plates on the table out of habit. And sometimes, when the phone rang, my heart would race, thinking maybe it was her. It never was. Years passed that way. The world moved on, but I didn't. I aged quietly, not just in body, but in soul. I learned how to live with half a heart. How to smile politely when people asked if I'd ever heard from her. How to nod when they said, maybe she found someone else. I never hated her for leaving. But I hated myself for not knowing why. Sometimes I'd sit by the window late at night, holding that note in my hand. It had faded over the years, the ink bleeding into the paper. But those 5 words still burned like they were written yesterday. Please don't come looking for me. I tried to respect them. I really did. But love isn't something you can turn off like a switch. It lingers. It haunts. It whispers. Even when you try to silence it. My son, Daniel, was 17 when she left. A boy on the edge of becoming a man, and too young to understand the kind of pain his mother's absence left behind. At first, he blamed me. And maybe he was right too. He said, "Dad, you must have done something. Mom wouldn't just go." And I had no answer. Because deep down, I asked myself the same thing every night. I replayed every argument, every small disappointment, every word I might have said without thinking. I searched for the moment, the reason that pushed her away. But I couldn't find it. Daniel changed after she left. He became quiet, distant, angry at the world, angry at me. He stopped coming home early, stopped sharing his thoughts, his plans, his laughter. He built a wall between us when I didn't know how to climb. One night, when I asked him where he was going so late, he shouted, "Why do you care? You couldn't even keep Mom here." And that was the first time I realized I hadn't just lost my wife. I was losing my son too. I tried to make things right. I cooked his favorite meals. I told him stories from when he was little, hoping to bring back some warmth. But nothing worked. He graduated high school in silence. Didn't even want me at the ceremony. I watched from a distance that day, hidden behind the crowd, just to see him smile. He didn't. After that, he left for college. And I was truly alone. The house became just four walls and echoes. Every sound was louder, the ticking clock, the dripping faucet, the creak of the old wooden floor. It was like the house itself missed her too. I started keeping a journal, something I'd never done before. I wrote letters I could never send. Letters to her. "Emily, I watered your plants today. The lilies bloomed early. Emily, Daniel's doing well in school, I think. He doesn't call much. Emily, I still dream of you sometimes. You're always walking away, and I can never catch up." Writing became my way of breathing, of pretending she was still out there, reading somehow. Years turned into a decade. Daniel got married, had a daughter, my granddaughter, Lily. I saw her only twice. Daniel and I had grown apart so much that even those visits felt like small miracles. He still didn't talk about his mother. He said, "Some things are better left buried, Dad." But I couldn't bury her. Not without answers. Then, one winter morning, 14 years after she left, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I'd recognize even in the dark. Emily's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The note said, "If you still wonder why I left, come to the old cabin by the lake. This Saturday, 5 p.m. The photo was of us, taken more than 20 years ago. The same day we'd bought that cabin. The day I promised her I'd never let her face the world alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Every thought, a question I'd carried for years. Was she still alive? Was she sick? Did she want forgiveness, or to say goodbye? The next morning, I packed a small bag, put on my old coat, and left. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. I just followed the road that once held the happiest days of my life. The lake was frozen when I arrived. The air smelled of pine and distant rain. And there, standing by the door of that old wooden cabin, was Emily. When I first saw her standing there, I forgot how to breathe. 14 years had passed, but my heart didn't know the difference. It still recognized her. She looked almost the same, only thinner, paler, her hair streaked with gray. The same eyes, though, still soft, still distant, still carrying the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The wind was cold, but I didn't feel it. It was like the world around us had fallen silent again, just like the morning she left. Emily. Her name escaped my mouth like a prayer I'd been whispering in the dark for years. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting me all along. The cabin hadn't changed much. The same creaky steps, the same faint smell of cedar and smoke. Even the same curtain, faded now, that she'd sewn herself one summer. She motioned for me to come inside. Her movements were slow, almost cautious. When I stepped through that door, it was like stepping into another life. Our life. There were pictures on the mantel, some I'd never seen before. And on the small wooden table, a kettle whistled softly. "I made tea," she said quietly. Her voice was gentler than I remembered, but thinner, like something fragile trying not to break. I sat down across from her. The silence stretched between us like an ocean. I didn't know where to start. 14 years of questions, and not a single word would come out. Finally, she spoke. "I know I hurt you, Michael." Just hearing my name from her lips made my eyes sting. She hadn't said it in years, but it still carried warmth. "I don't want excuses," I said, though my voice trembled. "I just want to know why." She nodded, looking down at her hands, trembling slightly as she held the teacup. "For a long time," she said, "I told myself I left for you. That sentence didn't make sense." She left for me? I almost laughed. but the way her eyes glistened stopped me. "What do you mean?" I asked. She took a slow breath, then another, as if the truth itself was heavy to carry. "Do you remember," she said softly, "the winter Daniel got sick?" I did. He was 8, caught a terrible fever that nearly took him from us. We spent nights by his bed, praying, holding his small hand while he burned with fever. I nodded. "I remember. You didn't leave his side." She smiled faintly. "Neither did you." She set her cup down and continued. "That winter, when he got better, I went for a checkup, just to be safe. I wasn't feeling well." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "The doctors found something. A small lump. They said it could be nothing, or it could be something very serious." My heart began to pound. "Emily." She looked up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since I'd arrived. "It was cancer, Michael. Early stage, but aggressive." The words hit me like a wave. For a moment, the room spun. I could hear the sound of the wind outside, the faint crackle of the fire, but it all felt distant. You had cancer?" She nodded. "I didn't want to tell you. Not then. You were already working 2 jobs, trying to pay off the mortgage. Daniel needed school fees. We had nothing saved." I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "Not out of anger, but sorrow. I saw the way you were drowning," she whispered, "and I couldn't bear to add more weight to your shoulders." "So you left?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You thought disappearing would help me?" Tears filled her eyes. "I thought it would free you." She stood up and walked toward the window. Snow had started to fall outside, soft, slow, like the world was listening. "I didn't know how much time I had left," she said. "I didn't want you to watch me fade. I didn't want Daniel to remember me that way." I felt anger rise in me. Not violent anger, but that deep, painful ache of being shut out from someone suffering. "You didn't trust me enough to stand with you?" My voice cracked. "That's what marriage is, Emily. It's standing through the worst together." She turned around, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And you would have. That's exactly why I couldn't tell you." The truth hit me slowly, like a knife turning inside my chest. She'd carried all that pain alone. All those nights I thought she'd abandoned us, she'd been fighting to live. But another thought crept in. "Then how are you still here?" She smiled, small, tired, but real. "I got lucky. The treatment worked. It took years, but I recovered." My eyes blurred. "You could have come back." "I wanted to," she said. "I tried. So many times. But then I saw you and Daniel. You were building your lives again. You seemed peaceful. I didn't want to open old wounds." I shook my head slowly. "Peaceful?" I whispered. "Emily, I was dying inside." We sat there in silence again. The fire cracked softly. Somewhere outside, a bird called once and flew away. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said finally. "But every year that passed, it got harder to face you. Harder to explain. I was ashamed, Michael. I thought you'd hate me." I looked at her, really looked. The woman I once knew, full of quiet light, had become someone who'd learned to carry pain like armor. And I realized, maybe she wasn't the only one who'd changed. After a while, I asked, "Why now? Why tell me after all this time?" She hesitated. Then she said something that made my heart stop. "Because I'm sick again." I felt the air leave my lungs. This time, there was no anger, just fear and grief. She went on quietly. "It's back. The doctors say it's spreading faster this time. I wanted to see you before it gets too late." I closed my eyes. I didn't know whether to cry, to scream, to hold her, or to just sit there, broken all over again. We stayed there until night fell. The old lamp on the table flickered softly, throwing gentle shadows across her face. She told me about the years she'd spent alone, moving from town to town, working small jobs, writing letters she never sent. She said she kept one photograph of us wherever she went, our wedding picture. "I used to talk to it," she said, smiling weakly. "I'd tell it everything. What I ate that day, where I worked, how much I missed you." My heart ached with every word. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold, fragile, but still familiar. "I would have carried it all with you," I said softly. "I would have carried you." She squeezed my hand gently. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I had to let you go." We spent that night talking until our voices turned to whispers. About Daniel, about Lily, about the years that vanished between us. She asked if Daniel ever spoke of her. I told her the truth, that he didn't. Her eyes filled again. "I deserve that," she said. "No," I told her quietly. "You don't." She smiled sadly. You always forgave too easily. And you always ran from love too quickly, I replied. For the first time in years, she laughed, not loud, not joyful, but real. It filled the cabin like an old song we both remembered. When morning came, she said she needed to rest. She'd been staying at the cabin for a few months, it turned out, alone, surrounded by her memories. I wanted to stay, to make up for the lost years. But she shook her head. Go home, Michael, she said gently. Tell Daniel I'm sorry. But don't tell him everything yet. Not until I'm ready. I hesitated, but I could see in her eyes that this was something she needed to do her way. So I left. The drive home felt endless. The sky was gray, the world muted. I kept replaying every word she'd said. The sickness, the pain, the choice to disappear. I understood her now. And yet, the understanding didn't make it hurt any less. When I got home, I sat in my car for almost an hour before walking inside. The house felt colder than before, like it knew she'd been found, but not returned. That evening, Daniel called. He said Lily wanted to see me. And for the first time in years, I heard warmth in his voice. When they came over that weekend, we sat in the living room, the same one Emily used to decorate every Christmas. Lily played with the old wooden horse her grandmother had painted years ago. Daniel noticed the picture of Emily still on the wall. He didn't say anything at first. Then he sighed. I still don't understand how she could just vanish like that, he said quietly. I think about it sometimes, you know? Maybe she just didn't love us enough. My chest tightened. I wanted to tell him the truth right then, to tell him his mother left out of love, not absence. But I remembered her words. Not until I'm ready. So I said, your mother loved us more than you'll ever know. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. Maybe he saw something in my eyes, something that told him there was more to the story. A week later, I received another letter. No return address again. Just one line this time. Please bring Daniel next Saturday. I didn't hesitate. We drove together to the lake. The silence between us on that drive was heavy, not angry, just uncertain. I didn't tell him who we were going to see. When we arrived, he froze. Emily stepped out of the cabin, wrapped in a scarf, her eyes already filled with tears. Daniel's breath caught. He whispered, Mom? She nodded, trembling. He didn't move at first, shock holding him still. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. And when she reached out, he fell into her arms like a child again. They both cried, long, heavy sobs that seemed to wash away 14 years of silence. I stood a few steps away, letting them have that moment. The snow began to fall again, softly covering the ground around them. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. When they finally came inside, Daniel asked the same question I once did. Why did you leave us, Mom? She hesitated, then looked at me. I gave a small nod, and she told him everything. He listened quietly, tears running down his face. When she finished, he didn't speak right away. Then, he took her hand and said, I wish you told us. I would have helped you fight. She smiled weakly. I know. That's why I couldn't. He hugged her again. And in that moment, something inside me healed too. That night, as the fire burned low, Emily fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Daniel looked at me and whispered, She doesn't have much time left, does she? I shook my head slowly. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Then we make the most of what's left. We spent the next weeks visiting the cabin every weekend. Emily seemed brighter, as if the light of forgiveness had given her new breath. She and Daniel cooked together, told stories, laughed over old memories. Sometimes, I'd catch her looking at me with that same gentle smile she used to have years ago. We didn't talk about the past anymore. We just lived what little time we had left. And then, one evening in spring, she was gone again. But this time, she didn't leave a note. Just peace. And love. We buried her near the lake, under the tree where we once carved our initials. The sky was quiet that day. Even the birds seemed to sing softer. Daniel stood beside me, holding Lily's hand. When it was over, he whispered, She finally came home. And I nodded. Yes, she did. The morning after Emily's funeral, the world felt quieter than I'd ever known it. Even the wind outside the cabin moved slowly, as though it, too, was learning how to breathe again after holding its breath for too long. I sat by the lake until the sun rose high above the trees. Her grave lay beneath the birch tree where our names were carved. The carving almost faded now, but still there, still ours. The earth above her looked soft, new. I found myself smoothing it with my hands, brushing away the fallen leaves. as if care could still reach her somehow. "Sleep well, Em," I whispered. "You found your way home after all." Daniel and Lily had already driven back earlier that morning. He'd offered to stay, but I told him to go. There are moments in life that belong to no one else. Moments you have to face alone, even when it hurts. Inside the cabin, everything was exactly as she'd left it. The mug she'd used for her tea, the scarf hanging by the door, a half-finished knitting project sitting beside her chair. She had been making a small sweater for Lily. The yarn was pale yellow, her favorite color, she once said, because it reminded her of morning light. I ran my fingers over the soft threads and felt tears rising again. How strange that something as simple as yarn could hold so much love, so much unfinished time. I stayed in that cabin for a week after we laid her to rest. Every day, I woke early, made a cup of coffee, and walked down to the lake. Sometimes I talked out loud, to her, to the silence, to myself. I told her about Lily's laughter, about Daniel finally forgiving me for things I didn't know I'd done. I told her how peaceful she looked when she left, how I no longer felt anger or confusion, just a kind of quiet gratitude. And I told her the truth I'd never spoken when she was alive, that I had once blamed myself not for losing her, but for loving her too little, too late. But sitting there, feeling the wind move through the pines, I realized something. It wasn't that I'd loved her too little. It was that I'd loved her like she would live forever. One evening, I opened the small wooden chest by her bed. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me and Daniel. She had written them over the years she'd been gone, then sealed them neatly, as if waiting for the right time. The first one I opened began simply, "If you're reading this, it means I'm at peace. Please don't cry for me. I had a full life, maybe not with you beside me every day, but always with you in my heart." Her handwriting hadn't changed. Still neat, still graceful. "Tell Daniel I watched his graduation from afar. He looked handsome in that suit. I cried in the crowd, but he never saw me. I was proud of him, proud of you both." I pressed the paper to my chest and let the tears fall freely. There was no shame in them anymore. They were love leaving the body in its gentlest form. The next letter was for Daniel. I didn't open it. That one belonged to him. I packed all the letters carefully into a small box and decided to deliver them myself. Before leaving, I took one last walk around the cabin. The air smelled like pine and memory. The lake shimmered beneath the fading light, and for a second, I imagined her standing there again, waving, smiling that small, tender smile she used to give when words weren't enough. I whispered, "Goodbye, my love." Then I locked the door and walked away. Back home, Daniel was waiting. He opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been standing there for hours. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled me into a hug. We stood there in the doorway, two men learning how to hold grief without letting it crush them. After a while, he said softly, "I found a recipe book. Lily wants to bake one of her pies." That sentence alone, so ordinary, so simple, carried a universe of healing inside it. That evening, we sat together at the kitchen table, the same one where Emily used to sit, humming while she cooked. Lily stood on a chair, helping stir the filling, her tiny hands sticky with sugar. Daniel looked more like his mother in that light, the calm focus, the gentle patience. For a moment, it almost felt like Emily was there again, moving quietly around us. And in a way, she was. Not as a ghost, not as a haunting, but as love that refused to vanish. When the pie came out of the oven, Lily said, "It smells like Grandma." And Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. That night, after they went home, I sat alone in the living room. The photo of Emily on the wall caught the soft glow of the lamp. She looked happy in it, carefree, like the world had been kind to her. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle, steady, comforting. I closed my eyes and listened to it. Grief, I realized, wasn't something you get over. It's something you carry differently over time. At first, it's a storm that floods every part of you. Then, slowly, it becomes rain, soft, familiar, and almost peaceful. The next morning, I began sorting through old boxes in the attic. I hadn't opened most of them since Emily left. Photographs, postcards, notes, trinkets, pieces of a life frozen in dust. I found Daniel's baby shoes, her old journal, a small, faded ticket from a concert we went to when we were first dating. On one torn page, in her handwriting, were 6 words. "Love him enough to let go." It took me a while to realize she had written that about me. Maybe about both of us. I sat there for hours, reading her words, feeling the slow, steady ache of understanding sink deeper. She hadn't just left because she was afraid to die. She'd left because she wanted to save the people she loved from drowning with her. It was a kind of love I'd never understood, the kind that sacrifices connection to spare someone pain. That night, I called Daniel. He sounded tired but calm. I told him about the letters. He came over the next day, holding Lily's hand. When I handed him the box, he hesitated. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. "She wrote these for us. I think she'd want you to read them when you're ready." He took the box and held it close. Lily climbed into his lap, curious about what was inside. "Grandma's letters," he told her softly. "She left stories for us." And I smiled, because that's exactly what they were. Stories. Pieces of a woman's heart, preserved on paper, still teaching us how to love after she was gone. A few days later, Daniel called again. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "She wrote one to Lily too," he said. "She must have started it years ago, before Lily was even born. She wrote, 'For the grandchild I haven't met yet, but already love.'" I couldn't speak. It felt like the world had folded back into itself, just for a moment, to remind me that love really does stretch beyond time. Weeks turned into months. The cabin by the lake became a place we visited often, not out of sorrow anymore, but peace. Daniel repaired the roof. I repainted the door, and Lily planted flowers around the grave. One afternoon, as we sat by the water, Lily asked, "Grandpa, do people still hear us after they go to heaven?" I smiled. "I think so, sweetheart. I think they listen through the things we do with love." She nodded, satisfied. Then she said, "Then Grandma hears us every time we laugh." And I believed her. That night, when the stars came out, Daniel stayed behind while Lily slept inside. He stared at the lake for a long time before speaking. "You know," he said, "I used to think she left because she stopped caring. But now I realize she loved us so much it hurt her to stay." I nodded. "She taught me that sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go with grace." He smiled faintly. "She taught me that too." We sat there in silence, father and son, two men bound by the same woman's quiet strength. The moonlight rippled on the water, soft and silver. And I thought, maybe this was what peace looked like. The weeks that followed Emily's passing were quiet, but they were full of small miracles. Daniel and I didn't speak about her disappearance or the years she had spent alone. We didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer heavy. It was steady, safe, like the lake at dawn. I found myself noticing things again, little things I had missed for years. The sound of Daniel's laughter when Lily tripped and fell in the garden. The way he frowned when he was thinking deeply. The way his hands shook slightly when he held something precious, just as mine had when I held him as a child. It was strange, realizing how much of him I had forgotten to see. Not because I hadn't loved him, but because grief had made me blind. And in that blindness, we had drifted apart. One afternoon, Daniel suggested we clean out the attic together. I had been avoiding it. Too many memories, too much Emily, too much pain tucked away in boxes. But he was insistent. "Let's do it together, Dad," he said. "I want to know the things she left for me, for us." We climbed the narrow staircase and opened the attic door. Sunlight spilled through the small window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny sparks. We started with small boxes, photos, letters, old books. Daniel found his baby clothes, his first shoes, the small toys Emily had kept for him. And for the first time in years, he laughed, a sound that filled the empty house with warmth. I realized then that we had been carrying grief alone for far too long. The attic became our sanctuary that day, a place to remember her and to remember each other. Weeks passed, and Lily became the bridge between Daniel and me. Her energy was uncontainable, a reminder that life continues even after loss. She asked questions, endless, curious questions, about her grandmother, about our family, about love. I answered honestly, gently, never shying away from the truth, but never letting it crush her. One day, she asked me to tell her about Emily. I hesitated at first, but then I saw the earnest look in her eyes, a mix of curiosity and love, and I began. "Your grandmother," I said slowly, "was the strongest person I've ever known. She had a way of making everyone feel safe, even when she herself was hurting. She loved you long before you were born. And even though she had to leave, She never stopped loving you. Lily listened carefully, absorbing every word. When I finished, she hugged me tightly. I wish I could have met her, she whispered. And I held her close, realizing that through her, Emily's love still lived in the world. Daniel and I spent more time together after that. We went fishing at the lake, worked on small projects around the house, and took long walks where we didn't speak much but felt the comfort of being near each other. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Daniel turned to me and said, "Dad, I've been angry at you too, you know. Not for leaving Emily. I get why she left, but for not fighting for us when she disappeared. I blamed you for being quiet, for letting her go without answers." I nodded slowly, feeling the ache of his words. "I understand," I said. "I was lost too, son. I didn't know how to reach her, or you, or even myself." He sighed, a deep, weary breath. "But we're here now, and that's what matters." It was the first time in years that I truly felt it, that we were starting over. Over the next months, our relationship deepened. Daniel shared stories about his college days, about struggles I hadn't known he carried alone. I shared my own regrets, my own mistakes, and he listened without judgment. We began cooking together, Emily's recipes, mostly. Sometimes we failed. Sometimes the pie burned. But it didn't matter. The act of being together, working, laughing, remembering, was what healed the cracks left by years of silence. Lily became our little teacher too. Her questions, her observations, her boundless enthusiasm reminded us both to cherish the present rather than dwell on the past. One rainy afternoon, Daniel suggested we visit Emily's cabin by the lake again. It had been months since our last visit, and I was hesitant. But he insisted, and I agreed. The cabin felt alive in a way it hadn't before. The walls seemed to hum with her presence, not as a ghost, but as the memory of love she had left behind. We cleaned, repaired, and arranged it so that Lily could play safely. And that day, Daniel said something I had never expected. "Dad, I want to start coming here every weekend. For Lily, for me, for you, for Emily." I felt a lump in my throat. "I'd like that," I said. It was more than just a cabin now. It was a symbol of our healing, our connection, and our family's resilience. Through those visits, I began to see Emily everywhere, not in pain, not in absence, but in memory and love. The lake sparkled like it had always done, but now it carried warmth. The wind through the pines was no longer empty. It was full of her voice, her laughter, her lessons. One night, Daniel and I sat by the fireplace, watching Lily sleep nearby. He turned to me and said, "You know, Dad, I think she left us letters not just to explain herself, but to show us how to live after she was gone." I nodded. Yes. And through Lily, through each memory, through every act of love we share, she's still teaching us. Spring turned into summer, and life felt steady again. Daniel and I planted flowers around the cabin, just as Emily would have done. We fished at the lake, told stories to Lily about the past, and laughed more than we had in years. One evening, sitting by the fire, Daniel asked softly, "Do you ever regret how long we waited to forgive?" I shook my head. "Regret doesn't help anyone," I said. "Better to forgive now, and let love guide the rest of our lives." He nodded. "Yeah, I think I'm finally ready to carry her lessons forward." It was a simple moment. No dramatic speeches, no sudden revelations, just quiet understanding between a father and son. And somehow, that quiet understanding felt like the truest gift Emily had left us. Lily grew curious about everything, about life, about loss, about love. She asked questions we didn't always have answers for, and together we explored the truths we did know. One afternoon, while planting flowers near Emily's grave, Lily looked up at us and asked, "Grandpa, Dad, do people stay with you even after they go?" I smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "They stay with you in every kind word, every memory, every act of love. They're never really gone." Daniel squeezed my shoulder. "She's here, Dad," he whispered. "Emily's here." And I knew it was true. The months continued, and our family felt whole again, in a new way. Not the way it had been before Emily left, not the naive sense of safety we once had, but something deeper, stronger. A connection forged in absence, strengthened by love, and carried forward by forgiveness. At night, when I would sit by the window, listening to the rain or watching the snow fall, I would think of Emily. Not with pain, but with gratitude. for the love she gave us, the lessons she left, and the family she taught us to rebuild. The years after Emily's passing were quieter, yes, but they were full. Full of small moments, full of ordinary days that felt extraordinary simply because we were together. Daniel, Lily, and I found a rhythm again, a life rebuilt on patience, understanding, and love we'd once taken for granted. I often sat by the window at night, watching the world outside. The wind moved through the trees, the stars glimmered faintly in the distance, and sometimes I swore I could hear Emily's laughter echoing softly through the house. It wasn't ghostly or sad. It was gentle, a reminder that she was still with us in spirit, if not in body. Daniel and I continued our visits to the cabin by the lake. The first time we returned after several months, the place had changed in ways only time could create. The wooden steps creaked a little more, the paint on the door was faded, and moss had grown along the edges of the stone path. And yet, the place still felt alive, because we carried it with us, in memory and care. We repaired the roof, planted flowers around the grave, and left little gifts for Lily to discover. Small things, a painted rock, a flower she could press in a book, a note from her grandmother tucked into a corner. She loved finding them, asking questions, and in those moments, Emily's presence felt vivid again. I started keeping a journal, not because I wanted to dwell in grief, but because I wanted to capture life as it unfolded. The laughter, the mistakes, the love, the quiet, ordinary miracles. I wrote about Daniel's stories, about Lily's curiosity, about the moments when I finally felt peace within myself. One entry read, "Life is not measured by years, but by moments of love we allow ourselves to feel and share." Emily taught me that. She lived quietly, loved fiercely, and left without bitterness. I can only hope to live the same way. Writing it down made it feel real, made the lessons last. Daniel grew closer to Lily with each passing season. He taught her how to fish, how to plant seeds, how to read the clouds. She absorbed everything, her small hands mimicking his movements, her bright eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and reverence. One afternoon, while planting tulips near the lake, Daniel looked at me and said softly, "Dad, I think I finally understand what Mom meant by letting go. It's not giving up. It's trusting that love doesn't disappear." I nodded slowly, feeling tears prick the corner of my eyes. "Yes, son, that's exactly it." As time went on, the grief became softer, not because it vanished, but because it became part of the fabric of our lives. I noticed it less in the pain it caused, and more in the way it taught me to live fully, even in the shadow of loss. Emily's letters remained a touchstone. Sometimes I read them aloud to Lily. Sometimes I left them for Daniel to discover when he felt the need for guidance or reassurance. And sometimes I read them to myself at night, letting her voice wash over me, reminding me of courage, of love, of patience, of quiet strength. The lake reflected every season. Spring brought soft blooms, summer brought long sunny days. Autumn painted the trees in gold and crimson, and winter blanketed everything in silence. Each season reminded me that life is cyclical, that grief ebbs and flows, and that love, real love, persists beyond the fleeting moments of absence. I began to take longer walks through the woods. Sometimes I brought Lily, sometimes Daniel, sometimes I walked alone. And with each step, I felt the weight of the past lift slightly. I felt my own heart grow wider, more patient, more capable of holding both sorrow and joy. One evening, Daniel and I sat by the fireplace, talking quietly while Lily slept in the other room. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "about all the years we lost and all the things we didn't say." I nodded. "I think about them every day, but I also think about the things we still have and the things we can create from here." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, we can't change the past, but we can live the present with her lessons in mind." And that's exactly what we did. We rebuilt our lives slowly, gently, not in grand gestures, but in everyday acts of care. Cooking together, planting flowers, telling stories, reading letters, helping Lily with homework, watching sunsets in silence. We laughed more than we had in years. We fought less, though, occasionally, tempers flared, and when they did, we remembered Emily's gentle voice in our heads. Love each other fiercely, even when it's hard. Lily asked questions about Emily constantly. "How did Grandma love us if she wasn't here?" she would ask. How can I be brave like her? I answered honestly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with hesitation. But slowly, I realized that by speaking of Emily with honesty and warmth, I was teaching Lily how to love without fear, and how to carry the past without letting it crush her. Daniel did the same. We became a team, rediscovering a family we thought had been lost forever. The letters remained a treasure trove. Daniel began to write in response, crafting messages he tucked into boxes and envelopes. He wasn't writing to send them, not yet. He was writing to understand, to heal, to carry Emily's legacy forward. I joined him occasionally, and together, we built a bridge between past and present. Through words, through shared memories, through laughter and tears, we honored Emily. And in doing so, we rebuilt ourselves. One day, while sitting by the lake, I realized something. I hadn't thought of Emily as lost in years. I hadn't thought of her as someone who abandoned us. She had been here all along, in Daniel's care, in Lily's laughter, in the small acts of love we shared every day. And in that realization, I felt a quiet kind of peace. I began to notice small signs everywhere. The way the wind moved through the pines, the sparkle of sunlight on the lake, the gentle hush of snow falling in winter. All of it reminded me of Emily's presence, of her lessons, of her love. It was no longer about grief. It was about memory and legacy, and living a life worthy of the love she had left behind. The sun rose slowly over the lake that spring morning, casting golden streaks across the water. I sat on the worn wooden dock, legs dangling, hands resting on my knees. The gentle ripple of waves lapping against the wood reminded me of time, how it moves steadily, persistently, never stopping, never waiting, no matter how much we wish it would. I thought about Emily again, about the years she had sacrificed, the pain she had endured in silence, how bravely she had chosen to step away, not because she loved less, but because she loved too much. And I felt something new, not sadness, not longing, but quiet gratitude. It's strange how grief transforms with time. When she left, it was a storm that consumed everything. Then, after her return, it was a river that carved its way through the landscape of our hearts. And now, years later, it had become a soft, constant presence, something I could carry with me, not something that weighed me down. Daniel appeared at the edge of the dock, Lily perched on his shoulders. He smiled when he saw me, and I smiled back. There was no awkwardness, no tension, only the shared rhythm of familiarity and understanding, the kind that only comes after surviving loss together. Lily squealed, pointing at a small school of fish darting beneath the water. "Look, Grandpa, fish." I leaned down to watch with them. The silver streaks flickered in the sunlight, moving as if dancing. For a moment, I thought about how life itself moves in similar ways. Moments of beauty, fleeting but unforgettable, carried along by a current we cannot control. Daniel sat beside me, leaning back on his hands. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about Mom, and about how much she gave us, even when we didn't understand." I nodded slowly. She gave us more than we'll ever know. Not just life, but the ability to love fully, even when it hurts. He looked at me with a kind of wonder, the same way I had once looked at him when he was a boy. "I understand that now," he said. It struck me how long it had taken, 14 years, for the two of us to really understand. The weeks that followed became our ritual. Every weekend, we returned to the lake. Daniel repaired the dock one summer. Lily learned to fish, and I taught her to skip stones across the water, just as Emily had taught me with Daniel so many years ago. Sometimes, we would sit quietly, letting the wind carry our thoughts away. We didn't need to speak. The lake and the cabin, the rustling trees and distant birdsong, said everything for us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in pinks and purples, Daniel turned to me. "Dad, I think I finally get it. She didn't leave us because she wanted to hurt us. She left to protect us. And in doing so, she showed us how to live." I let the words sink in. "Yes," I whispered. "She taught us that sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go, gracefully, completely, without regret." Lily yawned and leaned against Daniel's side. I looked at her and realized how much she embodied Emily's legacy, her curiosity, her courage, her kindness. Through her, Emily was alive in the most profound way possible. Over time, I found myself reflecting on the lessons we had learned. Life is not measured by the number of years, nor by the absence or presence of those we love. Life is measured by how deeply we feel, how openly we forgive, how completely we allow ourselves to be present in each moment. I began keeping Emily's letters in a small wooden box by the fireplace, alongside photos of our family and trinkets that held memory. Each one was a small beacon, a reminder that love transcends absence, that memory preserves what the heart refuses to lose. One afternoon, as Lily sorted through the letters, she asked, "Grandpa, do you think Grandma is watching us?" I paused, then smiled. "I think she is, in every laugh, every kind word, every memory we keep alive." Daniel nodded beside her. "And in everything we do to love each other," he added. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of loss as pain. I felt it as presence, a quiet, enduring kind of love that filled the spaces she had left behind. I realized something important. Life after grief isn't about erasing the past. It's about carrying it forward in a way that honors those who left it, a way that teaches us how to live better, how to love harder, how to forgive more freely. Emily had shown us that. In her letters, in her actions, in the courage of stepping away to spare us pain. She had left a map for navigating life after absence. And in those months by the lake, watching Daniel and Lily thrive, I finally understood what she had tried to teach all along. Love is patient, love is resilient, and love is the quiet thread that connects us, no matter how far apart we may be. One morning, Daniel suggested we take a long walk through the woods. The trees had bloomed fully in spring, their leaves shimmering in sunlight. The forest floor was dotted with wildflowers, and the air was heavy with the scent of pine and earth. We walked in silence for a while, just listening to the sounds of life around us. Birds called overhead, leaves rustled in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, water trickled gently over rocks. Then Daniel stopped. He looked at me, and I could see something in his eyes, gratitude, acceptance, and a depth of understanding I hadn't seen before. "Dad," he said, "I think I finally understand how Mom loved us, and I think I understand how we should love each other." I smiled. "It's not always easy," I said. "Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's messy. But yes, that's the point. Love fully, even when it's hard. That's what she taught us." He nodded, and for the first time, I felt the burden of all the years fall away. We continued to visit the lake through the seasons. Lily grew stronger, wiser, and more curious about the world each year. Daniel and I rebuilt our bond completely, not perfect, but resilient. I found myself sitting by the water often, reflecting on the years we had lost and the years we had gained. I thought about Emily's courage, her patience, and her wisdom. I realized that she had never truly left us. She was everywhere, in the love we shared, in the laughter of our child, in the simple act of being present with each other. I understood now that peace isn't found by erasing pain or rewriting history. Peace is found by embracing what we have, letting go of what we cannot change, and living fully in the moments we are given. One winter evening, as snow fell softly over the lake, Daniel and Lily came to the dock with hot cocoa in hand. We sat together, watching the flakes drift down, blanketing the world in silence. Lily leaned against me, her small hand clutching mine. "Grandpa, I think Grandma is happy," she said quietly. I felt tears well in my eyes, but they were tears of quiet joy. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "I think she is. And she's proud of us." Daniel smiled beside her. "We've carried her lessons well, Dad. We've made her legacy alive." In that moment, I understood fully. Emily's love had never been gone. It had simply been waiting for us to see it. In our actions, in our forgiveness, in our willingness to embrace life fully. Years passed. Lily grew taller, braver, and wiser. Daniel and I continued our tradition by the lake, teaching her to fish, to plant flowers, to skip stones, and to treasure the beauty of life, even in its fragility.